I want to show you some charts that'll blow your mind, because they sure did for me. So let's do this. First, we'll start this slideshow off with the world population. In 2023, we reached 8 billion people on the planet, resulting in a phenomenon known as overshoot, or Earth's carrying capacity being exceeded in its ability to regenerate itself. In geographical terms, we can see most of these people are in China and India, although there are still many all across the planet. In a pie chart-like fashion, we can see this again. This is too many people consuming too many resources on a finite planet. As a result, all major greenhouse gases have exponentially increased over the past 100 years, notably methane, CO2, and nitrous oxide, reaching over 500 parts per million of CO2 equivalent. We can see this increasing again, yet with each conference of party through the years, every single year. Zooming out, our CO2 concentration seen here, reaching above 420 parts per million in 2024. In a hockey stick-like fashion, I should reiterate, from Mauna Loa, we also find these readings measured daily, known as the Keeling curve, increasing with each year. What this contributes to is an Earth energy imbalance, or incoming solar radiation being absorbed and not reflected out into space. This also shown here from a image, a bit easier to understand. Most of the energy is going into the oceans. All told, the effective radiative forcing in 2022, including all major greenhouse gases, is 560 parts per million CO2 equivalent. If you minus the 1 watt per meter squared of aerosols currently keeping us cool, you would get about 3 watts per meter squared in 2022. However, the flux of energy from 2019 to 2023 has been rising at about 1.4 watts per meter squared measured in 2023. Of course, there is some variability in this, but the trend is going up, and globally absorbed solar radiation is increasing. Here, pictured from the 2000 to 2009 average, with a 12-month mean rising above 2 watts per meter squared. The trend is up, the albedo is down. The reflectivity of the planet, outgoing shortwave over incoming solar, a chart generated by Professor Elliot Jacobson showing the 12-month running average from February 2001 to 2023 is indeed decreasing. Another way of looking at this is the absorbed solar radiation over the outgoing long-wave radiation, which is being reflected back out into space, shows a net of 2 watts per meter squared. What this equates to inevitably is a global average temperature rise. This is increasing at an ever faster rate, as indicated here from a linear to nonlinear trend. Data produced from the NASA GizTemp, graphed by Rahmstorf. We'll see much more of this in a moment. The 12-month running mean was 1.5 degrees Celsius as measured by Berkeley. With each decade, it is getting warmer faster, and yet again, this is illustrated in a chart here showing that the rate of warming in the past 15 years has been 40% higher than the warming since the 1970s. What this equates to, among many other things, is an increase in billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. 28 of such happened last year in 2023. This is mapped out with a CPI-adjusted year-to-date event count from 1980 to 2023, indicating 28 again in 2023. And each year, counting all of these, the numbers get higher and the costs get greater. Of course, we can see this in the mean temperature normal and precipitation normal from 1991 to 2020. Notably, in the temperature from normal from 1991 to 2020 on the left, produced by NOAA, both of these We could see Death Valley, parts of southern Texas and Florida getting much warmer than the rest of the country, as well as precipitation increasing drastically on the right side of the chart from the Pacific Northwest down to even the Central Plains. This is one of my favorite charts I like to show new people, is the decadal change from the U.S. annual temperature compared to the 20th century average, difference from the average in Fahrenheit, produced from NOAA. And as I mentioned earlier, the oceans are getting warmer. Much of the heat is being, and indeed radiation is being absorbed into the ocean. And also increasing wildfires across the planet. But here in Canada, cumulative area burned by wildfires in Canada in 2023 far outmatched the 10-year average year to date, indicated by the dashed line below. Produced from the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. It is melting the ice caps. In March to September, there is a significant melt each year, indicated by the pink line of the 1981 to 2010 average, the fresh ice and thin ice concentration decreasing. Much more intense than the Antarctic ice melt, but it's still having problems down there as well. We knew that Greenland's melt would be increasing, as indicated here in the surface melt extent in 2023 in comparison to 1991 and 2020 trends. The red is 2023, and the average in the black line with some differences there in between. Again, the Antarctic sea ice extent is not as drastic as the Arctic, but it is still getting much thinner and decreasing in size. So what this means is multiple tipping points are being fast approached, which causes an exacerbated effect on all other delicate Earth climate systems. You can read up on each of these itself. I'm not going to read through each one, but indicated in a chart here, which has been the focus of the most recent IPCC, paying much more attention to tipping points, as it should be. We can see here at the central estimate, as we just reach 1.5, we can start to see the Greenland ice sheet collapse, West Antarctic ice sheet collapse, tropical coral reef die-off, and northern permafrost abrupt thaw. Also the sea ice loss in the Barents Sea. The thin red line is a range of estimates when these tipping points might occur, but we can guess that a half a dozen of them will start or have already begun in the temperature range that we are now in and fast approaching. One of these tipping points, which has been the focus of the media lately, is the shutdown of the AMOC, which would cause even more tipping points to enact and thus more problems. I am not going to read through this. You can study on it yourself, but let's just say it's bad. And one of my most favorite charts from the recent IPCC, showing the human lifespan in relation to our changing climate, in particular global temperature change. And if you look at the top colored line called very high emission scenario, as we know we are on the very, very high emission scenario, but under this conservative estimate, a person born in 2020 would be a young child in 2030 and 2040 and be in a planet about 2 degrees to 2.5 degrees warmer Celsius. These risks have been evaluated with every increment of warming having a risk impact of very, very high in the most recent synthesis report around the 2 degree mark, threatening unique systems, extreme weather events, and this distribution of impacts would occur across the planet. This is just another way of looking at the effects from a zoomed out perspective as we continue to pump more fossil fuels and oil from the ground at more than doubled rate from 2011 to 2022, thousands of barrels per day over the 1900 to 2022 baseline. As China also increases its coal power projects in 2022 with no sign of stopping, much more than every other country, trying to boost and grow their economy. How unequal are emissions? Well, the top richest 1% will release much more tons of CO2 than even the richest, poorest, or middle class individuals. As this affects our climate, also our flora and fauna with plants and amphibians, corals, mammals, reptiles, fish, and birds, taking the risk of a threatened with extinction list produced from the IUCN based on an assessment of 150,388 species. Nearly 42,000, a little bit more, are threatened with extinction from that. Also indicated here from another chart from the IPBES Global Assessment, Amphibians, Mammals, and Birds. And that just sort of glosses over the 30 charts I wanted to show you to blow your mind. I hope that was enlightening and gave you a bit more perspective on the global man-made catastrophe that is unfolding at a rate and pace the planet has never, ever seen before. I encourage you to live fully and present and be a good person. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good week.